Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the Old World custom campaign mod for Total War Warhammer 3. And what I want to talk about in this particular video are the campaigns that get some fairly substantial improvements compared to where they are in the vanilla game. And I want to emphasize that many of the campaigns that you're going to see on this list, or at least some of the campaigns that you're going to see on this list, are campaigns of powerful legendary lords, like consider Zaytan the Black. But in the vanilla of Immortal Empires, Zaytan does suffer quite a bit for a number of reasons. As I've discussed many times in plenty of videos, the early portion of the game is the most crucial one, and for cast dwarves in particular, starting with the tier 1 capital as opposed to a tier 2 capital, which Drazov and Astrogov do start with, is actually a significant downside. On top of that, he has Rumgor in his backside, so that's a major threat, but he wants to go forward into Cathay. And then there's the distances of settlements, all that. So it's not a great situation for Zaytan to deal with in Immortal Empires. But this is much better in the Old World mod. Because one, he does start with a tier 2 capital over here, and crucially starts with artillery recruitment, which is very, very nice for Zaytan considering everything. And on top of that, he has one of the better campaign areas, one of the best campaign areas in the game to actually play around with. And that is, of course, Zarnagrund itself. You gotta love how Zarnagrund is designed. And what's great about this, beyond, just resources, having a clear goal, having an objective to actually aim for, all that kind of stuff. Because your short campaign victory condition is to basically put down the rebellions that have sprung up over here in Zarnagrund. But what's really great about this whole thing is not just the territory, it's the sheer variety of opponents that you'll be dealing with. Like, for instance, I'm using campaign customization mods, so the AI is going to have higher level troops, they're going to grow their settlements faster, so you have, you do have a situation over here where you have Cathay, you have ogres, you have dwarves, you have greenskins, you have cast dwarves as well to, deal with potentially. So there is a wide variety of things to deal with in this situation, and that's not all there is to it. There's also all of the territory over here in the Badlands, so obviously the distance there is not necessarily going to be conducive for a great campaign experience, but still, you do have a great playground over here with Zaytan. So not only is he in a much better situation from a power perspective, he actually has a far more interesting campaign as opposed to just fighting freaking Cathay. So I suppose you could always ally Xiao Ming, wipe out Miao Yang, ally Xiao Ming, and beat the crap out of Snitch and Lokir, but still, kind of limited in that respect. And Cathay in vanilla game is generally great. There's even a freaking train. Holy shit. Like, wow. I don't think that's in there in the vanilla game. Am I wrong about that? I don't think I ever saw one. Wow. That's... Okay. Did I just miss all of that for so many years playing the game? But geez, that blows my mind. Freaking amazing. Like, it is worth pointing out that if you do endure the early game in Immortal Empires, you can make Zaytan. He's very powerful in terms of scalability, but it's that early game situation that really sucks there. Here, yeah, you might have to spend a couple of turns to, get into Zarnagrund, but once you're in there, things get a lot more interesting, a lot more quickly than they do in the vanilla game. And number 4, it would be Elspeth Von Draken for the Empire. Now, you could apply this to Gelt, and you can apply certainly to Karl Franz over here, who does have a different situation to deal with over here in Altdorf than you might otherwise expect. But here's the thing about Elspeth. The Empire as an area in this map is such a fantastic location in terms of its design, in terms of how it works. Though you may want to eliminate fewer factions than I did over here, so maybe like 80%, just so Norland is not wiped out over there. But still, the Empire is a vast area over here with a great diversity of opponents. You've got Beastmen, like you have Taurox over here For instance, you've got vampires, you've got ogres, you even have freaking Tomb Kings, let alone Skaven, etc. So that it makes for a wide variety of opponents to deal with. And that's great, because it can get pretty stale after a certain point in the Empire, in Immortal Empires. Like, once you deal with that early game, right, you just end up spending a lot of time just putting it all together. Elspeth is already in a better position in that respect, because she doesn't have to care too much about the Empire, unlike Karl, who's very much incentivized to care about the Empire. I mean, obviously, Imperial authority always matters for the territory you have in the Empire, but still. What I think makes Elspeth better is the teleportation mechanic she has through the Gardens of Morn. Now, it only applies to her army, so there is a limiting factor with respect to that, but it's that flexibility of the campaign map that always was a good part for Elspeth. Now, sure, Karl Franz has distant confederation with all Imperial faction. It's a guaranteed confederation. So you can just as easily put Karl Franz over here, and I think that would be fine. But I personally just rank Elspeth as the more interesting choice, because you have recruitment of certain units globally, really good units, and you have that ability of just teleporting, getting mages, getting unit recruitment deep in hostile territory. So that is why I think Elspeth is a great choice. Like, just even if you're playing a campaign of the Empire in the Empire, I would still think this campaign is a great choice to go for in general. Or just an Imperial campaign. I think like there's been a lot of effort put into, you know, designing the Empire and making it really work and really interesting, and really feeling that this is the most powerful, or one of the most powerful nations on the planet. The prime movers, if you will. A lot of action in the Warhammer universe does take place over here in the actual Empire. And I think Elspeth is just in a good spot from that. Also, it kind of should be pointed out that she doesn't have the same restrictions in terms of declarations of war with Imperial faction as, you know, someone else might have, right? So you're not really losing anything for doing that, whereas with Karl, that is a limiting factor. I mean, Gelt is in a great position. Again, like, Gelt also works out because he does still have, or I believe he does, still have, like, that quest line, though it is with Teclis as opposed to Xiao Ming over there. Anyway, Elspeth, good spot, good amount of variety in this campaign. The Empire in itself, like, far more interesting. Like, Nuln itself is, like, a far more interesting settlement to deal with, right? Because you've got these free regions. Like, look at the work that's been put on this map. Like, there, like, obviously it's not going to have overall the same level of detail, but, like, there are these moments. You look at Marienburg, you look at Altdorf, you look at Nuln, and it's like, yeah, that is great. That is fantastic work by Cass Robbie over there. At number 3, it is Teclis of the High Elves. Teclis' campaign in Immortal Empires is genuinely one of the worst campaigns for a Legendary Lord in the game. I mean, High Elves are a fairly good race, so it's not the question of the race. Starting position, faction effects just aren't particularly great for Teclis. Now, obviously, the faction effects are the same. That is something Creative Assembly should look at. But what is much better about this position? Yes, the start is not necessarily the most convenient one, having to deal with the siege battle over here. There you can certainly handle it. But what is much more interesting over here is, like, you've got Alfarian to the southwest. You've got Emmerich over here to the east. And believe it or not, while there is obviously some good amount of distance to cover, consider how far away from Ulthuan you are in Immortal Empires, and the issues that come with that. So you do actually have potential of confederation, at least with Alfarian. Emmerich is probably a tricky affair to actually manage. And then you have Gelt over here in the Badlands as well, in Myrmidia's coast. And you do have a selection of enemies to deal with, and you don't have the annoyance of having to fight fricking Kairos. In fact, your campaign victory conditions require you to deal with Warzak, who's over there, Nurgle, and Skarsnik. And you might leave Skarsnik to Belegar's tender mercies, if you will. Because
I believe, like, if I were to put a bet on who's going to win over here in Caracade Peaks between the free AI factions, it's not going to be Skarsnik. I mean, if it was just between him and Belegar, you know, that could go either way, but it's not just him and Belegar, it's also him, Belegar, and Queek. And yeah, I just don't see Skarsnik coming out on top in that particular situation. Skaven be Skaven. What can I say? So this is, but from my perspective, the benefit of this particular campaign in Old World is not so much the benefit of, oh, this is such a great position in Old World. It's not really a great position. But rather, his campaign in Immortal Empires is just so crap that even changing it to this, which is overall a mediocre situation in Old World, makes the entire campaign substantially better to play. And Teclis has always had this problem where his campaigns, be it in the Vortex campaign, Immortal Empires, and Immortal Empires, have always sucked. I mean, consider his Vortex campaign situation. He has this diplomacy benefit, which, by the way, you can actually use in this particular campaign. It's actually going to matter, because you get High Elves, Wood Elves, Lizardmen, and Dwarves, crucially. Also men. So, you know, the Empire, Belegar, etc. But here's the problem in the Vortex campaign. Because of the way the Vortex campaign was designed, you would always end up in a war of the Lizardmen, so all your lovely alliances that you had spent time building up would just collapse in the dirt. In Immortal Empires, it was better, but still crappy position, and really horrible position in Immortal Empires. And number 2 is Belegar Ironhammer of the Dwarves. Belegar's campaign does have its issues in Immortal Empires, between having Ikit Claw to the west, Sartosa to the south, and then having to try and deal with a multi-front war while having a plus 50% upkeep. That is not a great situation. Now, it is a bit of an awkward situation over here to start in the Blood River Valley, with one settlement in a province with 2 settlements that you're not even aiming for, because they're right over here. I mean, I suppose you could go for them. There are certainly benefits with the deep magma caverns and all that kind of stuff. But really, in this campaign, your goal is to take Caracade Peaks. It's to fight for Caracade Peaks. And this is what's wonderful about this entire situation. You have significant rewards if you do focus on Caracade Peaks. Some better than others, to be certain about it, like things like Robbie Town, for instance, or you can get Skarsnik's Lair, right here, Lord Recruit rank, which, by the way, would probably stack with O Fulfilled. So some very substantial benefits over here in this particular campaign for fighting for Caracade Peaks, which you want to do. Petty about Caracazol, which is probably going to fall to Queek very quickly in this campaign. Maybe that shouldn't be the case. But still, like, it creates a very good dynamic of a war over here between yourself, Skarsnik, and Queek. And how this plays out will be, well, dependent, of course, on faction potential. But things can go your way very quickly, or they can get very ugly very, very quickly. By the way, the work for Caracade Peaks is certainly one of the highlights of the Old World custom campaign mod. It's like such a wonderfully designed area. Really makes you feel like you're fighting for this ancient city. I mean, sure, it would be better if, you know, Total War supported the idea of a city being made by multiple parts in the underworld, all that. That's obviously not the system the game has, but this is as close as we're gonna get in Warhammer 3 to how Caracade Peaks actually was. Now, I do feel that you should not have to pay that 50% upkeep until you deal with Skarsnik. I feel like once you get the foothold over here, like once you take the West Gate, you should get that upkeep situation resolved. And after that, you can worry about Skarsnik. Like, that's kind of the problem with Belegar. It's kind of like all or nothing for him. Either he's in a crap situation because he has a plus 50% upkeep, or he resolves that, but gains such significant benefits that he's ridiculously strong. There's kind of no middle ground, and I feel like there should be an intermediate state over there where, like, you're not getting the benefit for controlling all of Caracade Peaks until you control all of Caracade Peaks. But you can at least get rid of the upkeep downside. But still, a much better campaign because it focuses on what this campaign should have been from the start. Not the crappy journey across multiple provinces to even get to a battlefield where you don't even really have that battle in the first place. Very rarely do you ever fight Skarsnik and Queek near Carragate Peaks itself in any Immortal Empires campaign. Here you will be, which is very appropriate. Finally, at number 1, from my perspective, it would have to be Ikit Claw of the Skaven. Ikit Claw's campaign in Immortal Empires is always a tedious affair to start. I mean, he is a powerful Legendary Lord. He has nuclear weapons, for Christ's sake. How could he not be a fun and interesting Legendary Lord to play? Well, because his starting position sucks. Skaven Blight is a single region province, which is a limiting factor for pretty much any race in the game, but it's particularly bad for the Skaven, because the Skaven economy, even though I don't have the structure built right here, but the Skaven economy depends on having multiple regions in a province and then building arcane generators for the extra income. Now, Skaven Blight can generate a decent amount of income if you're playing a Skaven campaign, but it creates a limiting factor. And then you consider the fact that you've got a lot of ports next to you, which further limiting factor, which also costs money to build, upgrade, repair. And then you're surrounded on all fucking sides by Legendary Lords. Seriously, you've got Mogr to the west, the Fey Enchantress to the north, Belegar to the east, Sartosa to the southeast. And then there's Scrag, don't ignore that aspect. And even better than that, you also have the entirety of Athelor, so you don't have the space to expand unless you're dealing with annoying fights from the very beginning of the campaign. And because of Mogr's tendencies of burning Astalia to the ground, you don't even have territory you can easily take. You have to deal with provincial capitals, you have to deal with full Legendary Lord armies from the very start. And while you certainly have the power to deal with all of that, it just creates a lot of limiting factors and frustration in a campaign to deal with. Well, over here, you're far from Athelloren. Also, you're isolated as the Skaven, which may not make sense for Skaven Blight, because, you know, that should be the center of Skaven population. So what is much better over here in the old world? Well, you have a full proper province for Skaven Blight. So you have these 4 settlements over here that you can take control of. On top of that, there's few Legendary Lords next to you. The closest one is the Fey Enchantress, and that's about it. On top of that, you also have several Skaven factions next to you, one way or another. So you have Clan Carrion over here. You can start making an alliance with them, eventually leading to a confederation. You have Snitch, very, very close to you over here. So you can confederate him. And this is, by the way, somewhat of a benefit for Snitch, though I think his Cafean campaign is really strong as well. So, like, actually Snitch does start with a single region province over here in the Knot Pit, so that's a bit of a shame for him. But still, it's certainly a better situation even for Snitch, and from the perspective of at least having other Legendary Lords next to you that you can confederate. And it's not like this is a free ride either. No. You've got Forik to deal with potentially. You've got Wulfric to deal with. Maybe Rakarth to deal with. And eventually Bretonnia will become a problem. But you also have Skrulk over here in Massive Orcal. So you have like 3 Legendary Lords of the Skaven, relatively in close proximity, that you can access, confederate, have allies. And surprisingly, while you might think that the Skaven just want to screw around everyone, the way you play Skaven in a campaign, you actually want alliances. You want trade agreements. Yes, I know it's a very un-Skaven-like, though I think the whole backstabbing of the Skaven in the lore doesn't actually benefit them that much in the lore. Like, in fact, I think Skaven suffer a lot because of their inherent backstabby actions. So you'll benefit from, like, surprisingly being a trusted ally to the factions you encounter. And, well, the problem is a lot of factions just don't like you because you're a filthy, dirty rat. Well, you now have other filthy, dirty rats to deal with in a campaign as potential allies, as potential confederation targets, and that just makes for a much better campaign.
But honestly, just starting with an entire province of 4 regions makes this campaign substantially better than Immortal Empires. It means you get easier access to the wonderful units that Ikit Claw focuses on. It means you're not dealing with a really annoying early game that's incredibly limiting and having to worry about resources as quickly. And it's not just like, oh, the territory is hard to take. No, it's fucking hard to defend. Like, you consider, you consider taking out Tylea and taking out Sartosa. Well, great. You encounter Belegar. Then you deal with Belegar. Oh, great. Half Lorion's going to come for you. Elspeth is going to come for you. And so on and so on and so forth. Like, one of the best things I found playing as Ikit Claw is just like, screw Skaven Blight. I mean, they're not going to take the city. Few AI factions have that kind of capability. But screw that region. Let me sail over the sea and go into Araby and take that from Arkan and Rapans and build that up as my economic center. And then I can worry about everything else. So that is the problem he faces in Immortal Empires. And here, yeah, you just got more territory to expand until you encounter those major threats. Though you will certainly encounter them at one point or another. I mean, honestly, I think his Immortal Empire situation would be better if Mogar wasn't burning down Estalia as quickly as he does, though, which creates a situation where, I saw Legend of Total War rather recently making a video on like, oh, here's how you rush Mogar to prevent that from happening. Great. Really fucking great situation. Like, that entire area of Tylea, Estalia, Skaven Blind, the mountains, Athlorin, just a really horrible campaign area in Immortal Empires. Because, like, the best thing you can do, like, if you're playing Belegar is rushing Skaven Blind. That's as fun as dirt to do every time you start a campaign. Or as Ikit Claw to rush Mogar. Or to pick an early game fight against Belegar. Have fun with that. So this is a much better campaign experience that makes it far more enjoyable, far more replayable, far more interesting to deal with. Like, say what you will about everything else, there are certainly campaigns that are on this list that are very playable in Immortal Empires, but this one is genuinely one that feels substantially better to play. Like, I hate playing Ikit Claw. I've always hated playing him in Immortal Empires and Mortal Empires. I got him day one, and I always despised playing his campaign because his campaign starting situation always sucked. Well, it no longer does with the Old World mod.